This horror did not deter my explorations. Even now, none of the sinister ambience one might associate with the haunted house assailed me in any other portion of the ruins. I continued to visit the place and explore, as I had before my encounter with the grotesque. I paid visits too to that nightmare tree. My initial fear soon abated. I studied the visage more closely, still convinced it was nothing more than an illusion. I knew well enough, as I said before, that the human mind can conjure up familiar images in random disorder, but this formation still puzzled me. The thing was extraordinarily unfamiliar, yet remarkably lifelike. From what recess of imagination or genetic memory could so alien a thing have emerged? It corresponded to no known species or mythological creature I was aware of. Surely my imagination would have conjured up something more familiar. The ground beneath the ruins was riddled with old drainage tunnels, scattered here and there. After one study of the wooden gargoyle, my eye was drawn to one of these, a passage I had not seen before. I do not know what drew me toward it, some childish impulse for adventure, or another, darker pull. Whatever it was, I eased myself into the passageway and began to crawl along the tunnel. A drainage tunnel would have remained roughly level, or at least followed the gentle incline of the land. This passage, however, ran at a steady diagonal, far out of kilter with the terrain. The tunnel widened ahead of me too, until at last I was able to stand. The walls changed as well. Red brick gave way to great blocks of a dull basalt-like stone, slid expertly, if irregularly together, to form a perfectly sealed wall without the aid of mortar or cement. While the handiwork of the ruins had been typical of British history, here the architecture seemed alien and undefinable. Basalt was only the closest analogue I could find for the materials of the blocks. Their true composition was entirely unknown to me. I walked on, my sense of time utterly lost. I knew I must be far from the ruins now. Under what, I could not tell. At this point I was still more curious than afraid. Just what had this passageway been constructed for? It was obviously not for drainage. I wondered if this might be an escape route, a more sophisticated version of the priest holes used by Catholics in Elizabethan times. The ruins seem more recent than that, but perhaps they've been built upon the remains of an older structure. I was so engrossed in these speculations that the most obvious detail of my exploration had escaped me. I was long past the entrance to this tunnel, and there were no other openings or light sources visible. How then was I able to see so clearly? I was truly bewildered now. I knew the human senses are just barely capable of echolocation, but the blind are described seeing objects by this means. But such skills emerge after years of honing. In any case, do not directly correspond to actual sight. It is probable that, had I entered the tunnel without light, I would have sensed the approximate size and shape of my surroundings, but nothing more. Perhaps there was a light source invisible to me. On my keyring was a tiny torch. I turned it on, and the effect was astonishing. The passage turned dark. The unlit passage had been clearly visible, but now there were only the feeble rays of my torch, illuminating the hand and the few feet of space ahead of me. I turned the torch off, and the passage returned to normal. Only now did fear really begin to creep in. It was utterly inexplicable. I tried one final experiment. I shut my eyes. Nothing happened. I could see the passageway as clearly as before, as if darkness itself were a positive quality to which my eyes had become accustomed to seeing by, and were hindered, not aided, by light. For an unknown period I stood frozen in the tunnel. As I have said, my sense of time seemed to have disappeared. I had left, by slow and imperceptible degrees, the world of certainty, of ordered and knowable things. A ruin of unknown origins. A lifelike grotesque formed of living wood. And now here I was, in a tunnel of unknown and alien design, revealed to me, not by light, but by some other unknown projection. One may think I would conclude I was dreaming, but reality is easy to distinguish from dreams, even if the reverse is not true. I did wonder if I had gone insane, but I knew of no disorder that produced such a lucid, inconsistent delusion as the one I was experiencing now. I knew then, against all reason, I was here, seeing not in, but with the dark, in a tunnel that should not exist, far from any home, or comfortingly familiar surroundings. Insanity, or nightmare, might be a more reassuring prospect than this. I tried to turn and make my way back, up the passageway, back to the world of light and sanity, but now my senses were further distorted. I was stood still upon the firm ground, but my sense of gravity had vanished. At one moment I felt as if I were turned upside down, the next I was perpendicular, the tunnel yawning below me, as a chasm. A second later I was convinced the ground was on the wall to my left, the next second it seemed to be on my right. Through all this bewildering experience I had not the slightest sense of motion. I was stood still, but the world around me was changing, its laws of physics mocking my feeble mind. The angles and contours of the passageway were indecipherable. I could no longer tell where the walls, floors and ceiling met, or how these stony blocks joined together, nor could I tell which way the tunnel sloped, or which way led back to the surface. My surroundings were revealed to me in perfect clarity, but my mind could not begin to interpret what I saw. if indeed it was sight that perceived this hellish passage, utterly dark and yet so visible. Some unknown intuition told me this tunnel had always been like this, that its initial mundane appearance had been an illusion, a residue of my terrestrial preconceptions, now shattered by the revelation of visible darkness. If my sense of time had disappeared before, now it was grotesquely parodied. I continued to stand as my sense of space and gravity were mocked beyond all reason, seemingly for centuries, yet equally for merely a few moments. At last, however, I felt impelled to walk, in which direction I had no concept. I did not seem to be in any danger of falling, though I had no way of knowing if I was upright, horizontal, upside down, or perpendicular. Each step felt like passing through unknown matter, composed quite differently to any state known on Earth, neither diffuse nor solid. Eventually the weirdness of my surroundings became familiar to me. A dimensionless, timeless passage lit by positive darkness seemed perfectly normal. Perhaps I had been down here a lifetime, and had grown used to my surroundings. It came as a shock, therefore, to find myself in a large hallway, with 4 clearly defined walls, a ceiling and floor, normal dimensions and an obvious light source. Less mundane, and far more shocking, however, were the room's contents, and its inhabitants.